The world didn't end with a bang, nor a whimper. It began with an itch, a phantom tremor in the cellular structure, an imperceptible shift in the very blueprint of life. For millennia, humanity gazed skyward, a fragile, hopeful beacon in the cosmic void, waiting for contact. It arrived not as an armada, but as a whisper carried on the solar wind, a microscopic payload delivered with surgical precision. They called it the Scourge. We called it the end. It wasn't a virus in the traditional sense, not a bacteria. It was something chi, a biological weapon designed not merely to kill but to unravel. Its arrival was silent, insidious. The first signs were dismissed as a new, aggressive flu strain, a rash of sudden, unexplained fevers, muscle tremors that seized limbs without warning. Then came the collapse, not just of the body but of the very tissue holding it together. Cells didn't just die, they imploded, dissolving from within. Organs liquefied, skin sloughed away in sickening sheets. A living being became a rapidly decomposing husk in a matter of hours, sometimes minutes. Panic was a slow burning fuse, then an explosive detonation. Cities, once vibrant hubs of commerce and culture, transformed into charnel houses. The pathogen spread with a terrifying, almost intelligent speed. Air travel became vectors of death. Ocean liners, ghost ships adrift with their cargo of putrefaction. Borders slammed shut, a futile gesture against an enemy that respected no boundaries, no sovereign lines. Governments crumbled under the weight of unmanageable death tolls. Emergency protocols, refined over decades for pandemics and wars, proved laughably inadequate. There was no cure, no vaccine, no defense. The Scourge bypassed every known biological countermeasure, every antibody, every pharmaceutical intervention. It was a perfect weapon tailored for absolute eradication. The global military response, usually a bastion of order in chaos, devolved into desperate, isolated pockets of resistance. Soldiers, trained for conventional warfare, found themselves fighting an invisible enemy that turned their own bodies against them. Quarantines were breached, not by force, but by the relentless march of infection. Firefights erupted in the streets, not between factions, but between the healthy and the infected, a desperate, futile attempt to contain the inevitable. The screams of the dying mingled with the roar of uncontrolled fires. Infrastructure collapsed. Power grids failed. The digital age, once humanity's crowning achievement, blinked out, replaced by a primal darkness punctuated by the burning pyres of civilization. This was the expected outcome. The aliens, presumably watching from the cold vacuum, must have anticipated a rapid, decisive victory. Humanity, a species obsessed with its own fragility, was proving their calculations correct. Millions died. Billions. The human population, once nearing 8 billion, plummeted with horrifying speed. The world was dying, choking on its own decay, a testament to an alien intelligence that understood biological warfare on a scale we could barely comprehend. But then, something impossible began to happen. In the midst of the rot, amidst the dissolving flesh and the gasping final breaths, anomalies emerged. Small at first, dismissed as statistical outliers, miracles in a sea of despair. A child racked by the fever whose skin didn't slough, but toughened, becoming almost leathery. A soldier, exposed to a direct spray of infected fluids, who should have been dead in minutes, instead found his wounds closing, his eyes sharpening, his senses hyper-alert. These weren't recoveries, these were transformations. The Scourge, designed to break down, was in some rare, isolated cases rebuilding, not in the way a body heals, but in a grotesque, accelerated form of evolution. Those who survived the initial onslaught, those who should have been utterly consumed, began to exhibit impossible traits. Their cellular structures, instead of degrading, were reorganizing. Their musculature, once weakening, became denser, more efficient. Their nervous systems, instead of shutting down, seemed to operate at an accelerated frequency, processing information with lightning speed. The fever, instead of killing them, seemed to forge them anew, burning away the weakness, leaving behind something harder, something faster, something undeniably other. These were not immune individuals, they were something far more profound. The pathogen, in its relentless pursuit of extinction, had inadvertently triggered a radical, violent evolutionary leap. The dying cities, once filled with the stench of decay, now held a new, unsettling scent, ozone and something metallic, something primal. The silence that followed the initial screams was not the silence of death, but the pregnant hush before a new kind of storm. The aliens had unleashed a bioweapon, expecting to sterilize a planet. They had, instead, forged a predator. Humanity was not extinguished, it was reforged. And the world was about to discover that a species pushed to the brink of annihilation doesn't just die. Sometimes it adapts. And when it adapts to absolute horror, it becomes the horror itself. The Scourge had not ended humanity. It had merely begun its true genesis. This was not the end of Earth. This was the birth of something far more dangerous. The anomalies were not isolated incidents. They were the harbingers of a new dawn, a grotesque sunrise over a dying world. The fever, the Scourge's agonizing signature, became a crucible. For the chosen few, it burned away the dross, the weakness, the very essence of what defined them as human. What emerged was something else entirely. Their skin, once soft and permeable, hardened, tightening over muscle, developing a leathery resilience that shrugged off lacerations and blunt force trauma. Bones, once brittle, became denser, almost ceramic, capable of withstanding impacts that would shatter a normal skeleton. The most immediate, terrifying change was in their eyes. The pupils, once dilating to light, now seemed to constrict to pinpricks of predatory focus, their irises shifting to unnatural hues, a cold, piercing blue, an incandescent amber, or a deep, unsettling obsidian. Their vision sharpened, able to discern minute details in near-total darkness, tracking movement with impossible precision. But it wasn't just sight. Every sense was hyper-accelerated. The faintest whisper carried across a ruined street became a shout, the distant thrum of a failing generator a deafening roar. They could taste the metallic tang of fear in the air, smelled the subtle pheromones of distress or aggression from 100 yards away. This sensory overload, initially disorienting, quickly became an advantage, a new dimension of awareness. Their musculature underwent a radical transformation, tendons thickened, sinews coiled with unnatural power. A casual stride could cover immense distances. A mere leap could clear obstacles that once required ropes and ladders. Their reflexes were no longer dictated by conscious thought, but by an instantaneous, almost precognitive, neural impulse. A thrown object, a sudden threat, was met not with a flinch, but with an effortless evasion or a devastating counter. They moved with a fluidity that bordered on the spectral, a predatory grace born from efficiency, not aesthetics. This was not merely enhanced strength, it was a fundamental re-engineering of the human kinetic system. The Scourge had stripped away the limitations of their biology, unlocking dormant potentials, or perhaps rewriting the very code of what a primate could be. And with these physical augmentations came a terrifying cognitive shift. Their minds, once burdened by empathy, by complex moral frameworks, by the anxieties of a fragile existence, became streamlined. Information was processed at an astonishing rate. Strategic thinking, problem-solving, pattern recognition, all accelerated to a degree that made normal human intellect seem sluggish, almost primitive. They saw angles, vulnerabilities, and opportunities that were invisible to the unmutated. This was not necessarily smarter in the traditional sense, but profoundly more effective. The first encounters between the transformed and the dwindling uninfected were brutal, definitive. The mutated, often emerging from the wreckage of collapsed cities or the depths of choked sewers, bore no malice, only an overwhelming, instinctive drive for survival and dominance. They were predators in a world that had forgotten what true predation looked like. Remnants of military units, armed with what remained of their dwindling ammunition, found their conventional tactics useless against foes that moved too fast to track, shrugged off bullets, and struck with concussive force. A single transformed individual could clear a fortified position, moving through a hail of gunfire like a ghost, dismantling an entire squad in seconds. Their wounds, if sustained, closed with horrifying rapidity, the flesh knitting itself back together, leaving only a faint, angry scar. This wasn't healing, it was regeneration, a constant, low-level repair mechanism that defied medical understanding. The screams that followed these encounters were not of pain, but of raw, primal terror. The uninfected, weakened by starvation, disease, and despair, were no match. They were prey. The social fabric, already torn to shreds by the Scourge, dissolved completely. There was no more government, no more law, no more pretense of civilization. What emerged was a stark, brutal hierarchy based on raw power. The transformed, or reforged as they came to be known, formed loose, territorial packs. Their communication was often guttural, instinctual, a blend of sharp, concise commands and a complex, non-verbal language of posture and movement. They scavenged with ruthless efficiency, took what they needed, and eliminated anything that stood in their way. They did not rebuild cities, they repurposed the ruins as hunting grounds, as fortifications, as monuments to their new, terrifying existence. The faint glimmer of hope that humanity might rebuild, might reclaim its former glory, was extinguished. Instead, a new, darker order descended. The planet, once teeming with a species that built towering cities and dreamed of the stars, was now dominated by something far more ancient, far more visceral. It was a world of tooth and claw, where the apex predator was no longer a symbol of intellectual superiority, but of sheer, unadulterated biological might. The aliens had sought to erase humanity. Instead, they had unleashed its most terrifying potential. Earth was no longer a garden world, it was a hunting ground, and the game had just begun. The game had indeed begun, and the rules were rewritten in blood and shattered concrete. The Scourge, intended as an eraser, had become a forge, hammering the remnants of humanity into a new, terrifying form. The reforged, once an anomaly, now coalesced into a planet-spanning presence. Their initial, instinctual drives for survival and dominance rapidly evolved into complex, brutal strategies. They were not merely survivors, they were the new apex. Their predatory grace, once a shocking novelty, became the standard. Moving through the skeletal remains of cities, their forms were blurred, blurs of motion, a whisper of wind through broken glass, a flicker of shadow between collapsing skyscrapers. Their enhanced senses, initially overwhelming, had been fully integrated, becoming an extension of their very being. They navigated the labyrinthine ruins, not by sight alone, but by a holistic perception. The faint vibration of a distant uninfected, the subtle shift in air currents signaling a hidden passage, the residual scent of fear lingering in a forgotten alleyway. They tasted the metallic tang of old blood on the wind, deciphered the faintest electromagnetic hum of abandoned systems. This hyper-awareness transformed the world into a vast, intricate map of opportunity and threat, rendered in shades beyond human comprehension. The remnants of human technology, once symbols of ingenuity, became their tools, repurposed with ruthless efficiency. Power grids, partially functional or resurrected through brute force and uncanny instinct, hummed beneath their control, illuminating key areas or plunging others into strategic darkness. Vehicles, once complex machines, were stripped of non-essentials, their engines hot-wired and retuned for raw power and speed, often modified with crude, reinforced plating. Communication networks, though fractured, were re-established. Not for idle chatter, but for terse, rapid-fire commands, for broadcasting territorial warnings, for coordinating hunts. They bypassed complex protocols with an intuitive understanding of raw functionality, bridging broken circuits, hot wiring systems, with a precision born of primal necessity. A sophisticated satellite dish once used for global data transfer might now be a beacon for a pack or a jamming device to disorient prey. Weapons from salvaged assault rifles to heavy machine guns were not just used, they were optimized. Their ceramic-dense bones absorbed recoil. Their enhanced vision made every shot a surgical strike. Their reflexes negated the need for advanced targeting systems. They learned to field strip, repair, and even modify these instruments of death with a terrifying innate aptitude. The packs they formed were not based on kinship or shared ideals, but on a brutal, undeniable hierarchy of strength and cunning. Leaders emerged not through election or lineage, but through combat, through the successful execution of complex hunts, through the sheer, unyielding force of their will. These leaders, often the largest, fastest, or most strategically lethal of their kind, commanded absolute loyalty born of fear and pragmatic respect. Dissent was a weakness, quickly and lethally excised. Their communication, a blend of guttural sounds, intricate body language, and a new, almost telepathic form of shared intent, allowed for coordinated actions of astonishing complexity. A pack could sweep through a district, flanking, cornering, and eliminating targets with the precision of a military unit, yet with the silent ferocity of a wolf pack. Their movements were synchronized, their individual actions contributing to a devastating collective purpose. The uninfected, those frail, fever-racked remnants of humanity, became less of a threat and more of a dwindling resource. They were hunted, not with malice, but with the cold, calculating efficiency of a predatory, its territory. Their desperation, their pleas, their futile resistance registered as nothing more than the thrashing of dying prey. Some were simply eliminated. Others, the more resilient or compliant, were herded into crude, makeshift camps, living out their final days as a morbid testament to the old world, or as a source of grim, biological fascination for their new masters. They were observed, their weaknesses catalogued, their decline a stark contrast to the ascendancy of the reforged. These human remnants became living, breathing historical markers, reminders of the fragility that the Scourge had purged. The planet itself underwent a profound ecological shift. The great forests, once sprawling and green, were now scarred by scorched earth and the relentless passage of transformed beings. Rivers, once pathways for commerce, became territorial boundaries, patrolled by figures moving with unnatural speed along their banks. The very air, once thick with the exhaust of human industry, now carried the faint metallic scent of ozone and the subtle, earthy musk of the reforged. The silence, broken only by the howls of the wind through broken structures, or the sudden, sharp crack of a distant hunt, was heavy with the absence of civilization. The aliens observing from beyond the shattered atmosphere must have been baffled. Their bioweapon, designed to eradicate, had instead accelerated evolution, twisting a species into something far more resilient, far more formidable than anything they had encountered. They had sown the seeds of extinction, but reaped a harvest of super-predators. The Earth, once a docile, fertile world, was now a hardened, razor-toothed sentinel, a testament to unintended consequences. It was no longer a planet to be exploited, but a fortress of raw, untamed power. The reforged were not merely surviving, they were thriving. Their numbers, initially decimated, began to stabilize, then, slowly, inexorably, to rise. Each new birth, each new successful adaptation, was a further iteration of the Scourge's dark miracle. They were the children of the catastrophe, sculpted by desperation, forged in fire, and tempered by the unforgiving reality of a broken world. Their existence was a living, breathing paradox, a nightmare born of a plague, yet embodying a terrifying, savage perfection. They were Earth's new guardians, not of peace or prosperity, but of a brutal, efficient order. The planet had not been conquered, it had merely changed its master. And this new master was a reflection of humanity's darkest, most primal self, stripped bare of all pretense, all weakness. The game had not just begun, it had found its undisputed champions. The silence that followed the initial cataclysmic shift was not peace, but the heavy quiet of a predator-controlled territory. The reforged, undisputed champions of a broken Earth, moved with a newfound, terrifying grace. Their forms, once blurred through shattered cities, now solidified into patterns of purpose. The world was no longer chaos, but a vast, intricate hunting ground, meticulously mapped by senses beyond human comprehension. Every vibration in the fractured ground, every subtle shift in the ozone-tinged air, every faint electromagnetic hum of a decaying power line. These were not distractions, but vital data points, woven into a holistic perception that rendered the planet an open book. Their initial instinctual drives had coalesced into a brutal, efficient societal structure. Packs, solidified by absolute hierarchy, patrolled vast, reclaimed territories. These were defined by the reach of their enhanced senses, the efficiency of their hunts, and the raw, unyielding force of their leaders. A reforged alpha, often towering, its ceramic-dense bones gleaming under a bruised sky, commanded loyalty not through charisma, but undeniable lethal capability. Dissent, a luxury of the weak, was a self-correcting error, swiftly and lethally excised. The packs operated with the chilling precision of a well-oiled machine, each individual a hyper-optimized component in a collective purpose: survival, dominance, and relentless expansion. Their communication, a complex blend of guttural clicks, resonant calls, and an almost telepathic shared intent, allowed for coordinated actions of astonishing complexity, far beyond the tactical scope of any pre-Scourge military unit. The skeletal remains of cities became their fortresses, their hunting grounds, their crucibles. Collapsing skyscrapers were not obstacles, but vantage points, ruined factories, not monuments to a lost age, but sources of raw materials. They repurposed the remnants of human technology with a terrifying, innate aptitude. Power grids, once complex networks, were hot-wired and rerouted, not for societal benefit, but for strategic advantage. A district might be plunged into absolute darkness, a perfect hunting ground, while another pulsed with raw energy for salvage, heavy weaponry, or crude, high-speed vehicles. These vehicles, stripped down to their chassis, reinforced with salvaged plating, and retuned for brute force, became extensions of their predatory speed, tearing through derelict streets like metal beasts. Communication networks, though fractured, were re-established with ruthless efficiency. Satellite dishes, once for global data transfer, became territorial beacons or jamming devices, broadcasting low-frequency pulses that disoriented the few remaining uninfected or warned off rival packs. They bypassed complex protocols with an intuitive understanding of raw functionality, bridging broken circuits, hot wiring systems with a precision born of primal necessity. Weapons, from salvaged assault rifles to heavy machine guns, were optimized. Their ceramic-dense bones absorbed recoil. Their enhanced vision made every shot a surgical strike. Their reflexes negated the need for advanced targeting systems. They learned to field strip, repair, and even modify these instruments of death with a terrifying innate aptitude, creating new hybrid armaments perfectly suited to their augmented physiology. The uninfected, those frail, fever-racked remnants of humanity, were no longer even a threat. They were a dwindling resource, a morbid curiosity, a living testament to the fragility the Scourge had purged. Some were hunted with the cold, calculating efficiency of a predator securing its territory, their desperation and futile resistance registering as nothing more than the thrashing of dying prey. Others, the more resilient or compliant, were herded into crude, makeshift camps, living out their final days as grim historical markers, or as subjects of chilling, detached biological fascination. They were observed, their weaknesses catalogued, their decline a stark contrast to the terrifying ascendancy of the reforged. Their pleas, their memories of a lost world, were meaningless static against the roar of the new order. They were the ghosts of a forgotten past, their very existence a stark reminder of the evolutionary, dead-end humanity in its original form had become. The planet itself had undergone a profound ecological metamorphosis, mirroring the transformation of its dominant species. Great forests, once sprawling and green, were now scarred by scorched earth and the relentless passage of transformed beings. Rivers, once pathways for commerce, became territorial boundaries, patrolled by figures moving with unnatural speed along their banks. The very air, once thick with human industry, now carried the faint metallic scent of ozone, the subtle earthy musk of the reforged, and the lingering metallic tang of old blood. The silence, broken only by the howls of the wind through broken structures, or the sudden, sharp crack of a distant hunt, was heavy with the absence of civilization, replaced by the thrum of a world reordered by primal law. And above, beyond the shattered atmosphere, the alien observers watched. Their initial bafflement had curdled into something colder, more akin to dawning horror. They had sown the seeds of extinction but reaped a harvest of super predators. Their bioweapon, designed to sterilize a world, had instead accelerated evolution, twisting a species into something far more resilient, far more formidable than anything they had encountered. Earth was no longer a resource to be exploited, a pest to be purged. It was a hardened, razor-toothed sentinel, a fortress of raw, untamed power, its defenders a nightmare born of a plague, yet embodying a terrifying, savage perfection. The reforged were not merely surviving, they were thriving. Their numbers, initially decimated, had stabilized, then slowly, inexorably, begun to rise. Each new birth, each new successful adaptation was a further iteration of the Scourge's dark miracle. They were the children of catastrophe, sculpted by desperation, forged in fire, and tempered by the unforgiving reality of a broken world. Their existence was a chilling testament to unintended consequences, an example of a species pushed past the brink and emerging, not broken but perfected by the very force designed to destroy it. They were Earth's new guardians, not of peace or prosperity, but of a brutal, efficient order. The planet had not been conquered, it had merely changed its master. This new master was a reflection of humanity's darkest, most primal self, stripped bare of all pretense, all weakness. The game had not just found its undisputed champions, it had redefined the very nature of victory, creating an enemy far more formidable than any the universe had ever known. For the aliens, the chilling realization began to dawn. They had not only failed to conquer Earth, they had unwittingly created the very force that might one day turn its terrifying gaze outward. The hunter had become the hunted. The chilling realization for the alien observers was not a gradual dawning, but a sudden, visceral strike. They had watched a world succumb, had meticulously catalogued its demise, yet what unfolded before them was not the quiet death of a failed experiment, but the violent birth of an apex predator. Earth, once a docile petri dish, had become a crucible, forging an enemy so utterly unforeseen, so devastatingly efficient, that the very fabric of their interstellar complacency began to fray. Their initial analysis, based on millennia of observed biological warfare outcomes, had been catastrophically flawed. They had anticipated a biological collapse, a slow, agonizing extinction. Instead, they had ignited a biological explosion, accelerating evolution at a rate previously deemed impossible, creating a species not just adapted to chaos, but perfected by it. The reforged, masters of their broken planet, began to look up. It wasn't a conscious, philosophical yearning for the stars, but an instinctual expansion of their dominant drives. Their enhanced senses, once meticulously mapping the shattered urban sprawl, now stretched higher, detecting the faint, rhythmic hum of the alien vessels in orbit, the subtle distortion of light in the upper atmosphere, the electromagnetic signatures that pulsed with an arrogance born of unchallenged superiority. These weren't just distant curiosities, they were targets. The concept of territory for the reforged had never been confined by oceans or land masses. It was defined by the reach of their senses, the limits of their power. And now, their power had a new, undeniable frontier, the void above. The first attempts were crude, born of an almost primal mimicry. They observed the trajectory of falling debris from their own destroyed satellites, the re-entry burns of alien probes. They began to experiment with propulsion, adapting salvaged jet engines from forgotten military bases, retuning them not for atmospheric flight, but for raw, explosive thrust. Their ceramic-dense bodies could withstand G-forces that would pulverize uninfected human bone. Their neural pathways, accelerated and optimized, could process complex calculations of trajectory and thrust with an intuitive speed that bypassed traditional engineering. They cannibalized derelict space shuttles, not for their sophisticated avionics, but for their structural integrity, their heat-resistant tiles, their raw materials. Factories, once churning out consumer goods, now became crude, dangerous shipyards, their assembly lines repurposed by brute force and a terrifying, innate understanding of stress points and material tolerances. The aliens, initially dismissive of these terrestrial endeavors, watched with growing unease as massive, improvised launch platforms began to rise from the scorched plains. These weren't elegant rockets. They were brutalist monuments to raw power, assembled from twisted rebar, reinforced concrete, and the salvaged plating of every heavy vehicle they could find. Their propellants were equally crude but devastatingly effective, highly volatile, refined fuels scavenged from industrial reserves, mixed with improvised accelerants. The launches themselves were apocalyptic events, tearing the very air apart, shaking the ground for miles, leaving craters of fused earth. The first few attempts were catastrophic failures, exploding on the pad, disintegrating in the lower atmosphere. But each failure was a data point, absorbed, analyzed, and integrated by the collective consciousness of the reforged. They learned from destruction with a speed that defied logic. Their communication networks, once terrestrial, began to stretch upwards. They repurposed the vast parabolic dishes of abandoned observatories, not for listening to the cosmos, but for broadcasting powerful, focused energy pulses, testing the limits of atmospheric penetration, attempting to disrupt the alien surveillance. These pulses, initially random, became more focused, more deliberate, almost probing. The alien vessels designed for passive observation suddenly found their sensitive instruments assaulted by raw, untamed energy. Their cloaking fields flickered. Their data streams were corrupted by blasts of interference that hummed with a primal, aggressive intent. The observers, safe in their orbital sanctuaries, felt a cold dread begin to seep into their consciousness. The prey was not only fighting back, it was looking up, and it was learning. The scale of the reforged's ambition became horrifyingly clear. They weren't just attempting to reach orbit, they were building weapons. Salvaged nuclear warheads, once the ultimate deterrent of a bygone human era, were not merely disarmed, but reverse-engineered. Their internal mechanisms, the intricate trigger systems, the fissile cores, these were analyzed with a chilling detachment, their destructive potential reimagined. They understood energy, raw power, and how to unleash it. The very concept of mutually assured destruction, a complex human theory, was alien to them. Their logic was simpler. If it could destroy, it could be repurposed to destroy their enemies. The alien high command, once confident in their strategic superiority, descended into frantic debate. Retreat was proposed, but the shame of abandoning a biological experiment gone catastrophically wrong was too great. A second, more potent bioweapon. The risk was too high. They had seen the unforeseen consequences. Direct intervention. Their ships, designed for stealth and observation, were not built for direct planetary assault against a species that could withstand atmospheric re-entry and absorb weapon impacts. They had inadvertently created a species that negated their primary tactical advantages. Earth had become a biological minefield, a fortress bristling with a new, terrifying life. The reforged, meanwhile, continued their relentless ascent. Their vessels, crude and brutal, were not designed for comfort or extended interstellar travel. They were projectile weapons, launched with suicidal determination, aimed at the glimmering points of light in the night sky. Each launch was a testament to their single-minded purpose, vengeance, dominance, and the primal need to eliminate any perceived threat to their evolved existence. They didn't care about the vastness of space, only the targets within it. The stars were not beckoning wonders, but distant havens for their architects of plague. The first successful orbital insertion was not celebrated with fanfare, but met with a silent, chilling determination. A repurposed cargo freighter, its hull scarred and welded, its engines belching fire, clawed its way into the black. It carried no crew in the traditional sense, but a hardened contingent of reforged, their bodies fused with the ship's control systems, their enhanced senses serving as navigation and targeting arrays. It was a spear launched from a wounded planet, aimed directly at the heart of their tormentors. The alien fleet, once untouchable, found itself staring down the barrel of an evolutionary shotgun. The war had not ended with the Scourge, it had merely shifted battlegrounds. The biological weapon intended to cleanse a world had instead forged its most formidable defender. Humanity, in its broken, reforged state, was no longer a victim. It was a weapon, honed by catastrophe, infused with a terrifying, savage perfection, and now it was ready to turn its gaze beyond the shattered atmosphere, ready to bring the full, brutal force of its unintended evolution to the very doorstep of its creators. The hunters, who had once observed with clinical detachment, now became the hunted, as the children of their plague began their terrible, inevitable ascent. The universe had witnessed the birth of a new kind of terror, a species born from the ashes of its own destruction, a force ready to redefine conflict on an interstellar scale. Earth, the planet they had tried to sterilize, was now sending its monstrous, perfected progeny outward, a dark seed of vengeance sown by their own hand. The silence of space was about to be shattered, not by alien invasion, but by a chilling, guttural roar from a world they had thought conquered. The silence was a lie, a fragile cosmic membrane stretched taut across the void, just waiting to be ruptured. For millennia, the alien observation fleet had existed within it, an unchallenged testament to their strategic foresight and technological prowess. Their ships, sleek, silent, and cloaked, had orbited 1,000 worlds, monitoring, cataloging, occasionally intervening with surgical precision. They were the apex observers, the unseen architects of galactic order. But on this world on Earth, their order was about to be obliterated by a chaos they themselves had engineered. The first indication wasn't a conventional signature, no diplomatic hails, no warning shots across the bow. It was a raw, unfiltered surge of energy, a scream of repurposed engines, tearing through the vacuum like a cosmic fist. The reforged vessel, a brutalist shard of twisted metal and scorched ceramics, did not glide. It hurtled. It was a weaponized projectile, less a ship and more a hyperdense slug, launched from a planet that had become a foundry of vengeance. Its trajectory was not calculated for elegant orbital insertion, but for direct, annihilating impact. On board the primary observation vessel, the Ethel, the bridge crew, a multi-limbed, multi-optic species accustomed to serene data streams, recoiled. Their instruments, refined over eons to detect the subtlest gravitational fluctuations or the faintest electromagnetic whispers, shrieked with overload. The incoming object defied every known classification. It was too fast, too crude, too angry. Its energy signature pulsed with a ferocity that bordered on biological, a primal scream translated into raw thrust. Unidentified object, direct intercept course with E-Ethel, all the evasive maneuvers initiated. The primary tactical officer, a being designated 7R9, articulated the impossibility with a tremor in its vocalizer. Their ships were designed for stealth, for evasion, for silent withdrawal, not for direct confrontation, not for this. The reforged, fused within the very superstructure of their vessel, felt the acceleration not as a strain, but as an extension of their own enhanced physiology. Their minds, a collective neural network of terrifying efficiency, processed the alien ship's defensive patterns in microseconds. They weren't reacting, they were anticipating. Their enhanced senses, once scanning for edible debris in urban ruins, now painted a detailed, real-time map of the alien vessel's shield harmonics, its weak points, its vital conduits. This was not a calculated attack by a strategic force. It was the instinctive lunge of a perfected predator. The Sethiathel's energy shields shimmered, then buckled under the impact. The reforged vessel didn't just strike, it gouged. Its reinforced prow, a composite of fused alloys and ceramic-dense bone, tore through the outer layers of the alien hull like a hypervelocity chisel. Alarms blared. Oxygen vented into the void. The Ethelak, designed to observe, not to endure, listed violently. The crew, accustomed to sterile detachment, were thrown from their stations, their delicate forms crushed against bulkheads. This wasn't war as the aliens understood it. There were no broadsides, no elegant volleys of plasma. This was an unhinged, suicidal assault. The reforged vessel, having breached the hull, didn't disengage. It burrowed. Tendrils of repurposed wiring fused and hardened, snaked from its damaged frame, seeking purchase, drawing power from the Ethela's wounded conduits. Its internal mechanisms, once scavenged jet engines and industrial pumps, now roared with a guttural, terrifying energy, not to propel, but to consuming. From within the shattered hull of the Ethel, the reforged contingent emerged. They were not clad in suits or equipped with ranged weapons. Their bodies were the weapons. Their ceramic-dense skin shimmered under the emergency lights, impervious to the vacuum, their enhanced musculature ripping through twisted bulkheads with ease. Their eyes, glowing with a primal, focused intensity, saw not advanced technology, but vulnerable conduits, critical systems, and the soft, fleshy forms of their tormentors. The alien security forces, sleek and agile, deployed with energy rifles. They fired. The bolts, designed to incapacitate or vaporize, merely superheated the reforged outer layers, leaving glowing scorch marks that healed with disturbing speed. The reforged didn't dodge, they absorbed, and then they counterattacked. Their movements were a blur, a terrifying blend of raw power and impossible precision. They moved through the labyrinthine corridors with an innate spatial awareness, bypassing security protocols, dismantling defenses with brutal efficiency. Their method of combat was horrifyingly direct. A reforged would seize an alien guard, not with a precise grapple, but with a bone-shattering grip, crushing limbs, tearing through protective gear. They weren't fighting to capture. They were fighting to eradicate. Their enhanced neural pathways processed the alien's biology, its weaknesses, its vulnerabilities in the instant of contact. They learned from every strike, every defense, integrating the data into their collective consciousness, evolving their tactics in real time. Panic erupted across the alien fleet. The initial reports from the Ethelak were incomprehensible. Hull breach, hostiles uncontained, unconventional combatants, invulnerable. The High Command, once resolute in their strategic superiority, now faced a threat that defied every tactical doctrine. Their ships, designed for passive observation, were being torn apart from the inside by a species they had deemed biologically inferior. The reforged, having neutralized the Ethely's critical systems and its remaining crew, didn't stop. Their collective consciousness, now broadcasting through the captured ship's comms, sent out a chilling, untranslatable signal across the void. It wasn't a message, it was a declaration, a raw, guttural challenge that resonated with the violence of a newly awakened predator. And then, using the Cephal's dying thrusters, they initiated a collision course with the next alien vessel in the formation, a brutal, self-sacrificing act of pure, unadulterated vengeance. The first engagement in the void was not a battle of fleets, but a massacre. The aliens, caught entirely unprepared for such a primal, suicidal ferocity, fell back in disarray. Their advanced weaponry, their sophisticated defenses, their centuries of tactical theory were useless against a foe that defied logic, a species that had transformed itself into a living weapon. The universe had witnessed the birth of a new kind of terror. Not from the cold calculations of a distant empire, but from the searing crucible of a planet they had tried to sterilize. Humanity, reforged and perfected by plague, had not only survived, it had ascended. And now, its monstrous progeny, born of catastrophe and fueled by an instinctual drive for dominance, was unleashed upon the stars. The silence of space was shattered, replaced by the screams of alien ships, a chilling testament to the terrifying reality. The hunters had become the hunted, and the cosmic scales had irrevocably tipped. The initial shockwave of the Ethos' destruction, a silent expanding bloom of debris and dying energy signatures, ripped through the alien observation fleet like a physical blow. Their tactical readouts, usually a symphony of precise data, now screamed with anomalous readings, hull breaches, energy spikes, biosignatures that defied classification, all radiating from a point where a sophisticated vessel had once existed. Panic, a concept alien to their highly ordered existence, began to ripple through the ranks. These were beings accustomed to the cold calculus of cosmic mechanics, not the visceral horror of being torn apart by an adversary that seemed to relish its own destruction. Their ships, designed for passive observation, for the subtle manipulation of nascent civilizations, were now being repurposed as battering rams by the very species they had sought to control. The High Command, cloistered within the deepest, most fortified sections of their flagship, the Ascendant Primac, struggled to process the unfolding catastrophe. Holographic projections flickered, displaying the grotesque ballet of the reforged vessel, still fused to the remnants of the Aethel, now accelerating towards the Vigil, AST, a medical and research cruiser. It was an act of pure, unadulterated, suicidal aggression, a tactic utterly devoid of the strategic elegance the aliens revered. Their strategists, brilliant minds honed over millennia of galactic governance, found their algorithms breaking, their predictive models dissolving into chaos. This wasn't war. It was an infection, a brutal biological virus unleashed directly onto their most vital organs. The Vigil, caught off guard by the sheer velocity and unconventional trajectory, managed to raise its shields, but it was too late. The hybrid reforged vessel, a grotesque fusion of alien tech and earthborn rage, didn't merely impact, it embedded. It became a malignant tumor, burrowing deeper, its internal mechanisms a terrifying guttural roar as it consumed the cruiser's power core. The screams of the alien crew, once transmitted as high-frequency distress signals, abruptly ceased, replaced by a static-laced silence that was infinitely more chilling. The Reforged, a collective consciousness of perfected predators, were not interested in taking prisoners. They were not interested in negotiation or surrender. Their mission was absolute eradication. From the shattered remnants of the Vigil, a new signal emerged, not a distress call but a pulse, a resonant frequency, deep and primal, that thrummed through the void, bypassing alien encryption, overriding their comms. It was the Reforged collective, broadcasting their presence, their intent. It wasn't a language. It was a declaration of absolute dominance, a raw, untranslatable message that spoke of power, of vengeance, of an evolutionary leap born of fire and death. The alien fleet recoiled. Their advanced sensors, once so proud of their precision, now detected a terrifying proliferation of biosignatures within the Vigil, moving with impossible speed, dismantling systems, weaponizing the very ship they occupied. The Reforged were not just invaders, they were parasites, turning their hosts into extensions of their own terrifying will. The tactical response from the Ascendant Primac was swift, desperate, and utterly futile. Fighters, sleek and agile, launched in swarms, unleashing volleys of plasma and kinetic rounds. The Reforged, still within the captured vessels, didn't engage them conventionally. Instead, they redirected the dying ship's own weapon systems, turning the alien cruiser's railguns and energy cannons against its own fleet. Explosions blossomed across the blackness, not from the attacking fighters but from the ships they were attempting to rescue. The Reforged had mastered their enemy's technology in moments, not years, not centuries. Their enhanced neural pathways processed complex schematics and operational parameters with a speed that bordered on prescience. They were not just adapting, they were evolving, their combat doctrine in real time, integrating alien tech into their own terrifying arsenal. This was not a war of attrition, it was a war of transformation. Every alien ship captured, every system compromised, became a new weapon in the Reforged's relentless campaign. They weren't just destroying ships, they were assimilating them. The hulls, once gleaming testaments to alien engineering, became grotesque extensions of the Reforged's ceramic-dense physiology, their internal conduits pulsing with raw, repurposed energy. The alien high command watched in horror as their fleet, once an impenetrable shield, began to cannibalize itself under the Reforged's unseen hand. Their protocols, designed for logical, predictable adversaries, offered no counter to a foe that defied all logic, that embraced the unpredictable, that reveled in chaos. The terror wasn't just physical, it was existential. These aliens, who had observed countless civilizations rise and fall, who had subtly guided the course of stellar empires, now faced a species that had rewritten the very rules of existence. Humanity, reborn from the ashes of plague, had transcended its biological limitations, forging itself into something that was not merely post-human, but anti-alien. They were a living rebuke to the aliens' hubris, a testament to the brutal, unforgiving crucible of Earth's evolution. The bioweapon, designed to sterilize, had instead catalyzed an apotheosis. As the Vigil, now a weaponized husk, hurtled towards the Luminok, a communications hub, the alien fleet finally broke formation. Their retreat was not orderly, not strategic, it was a desperate, panicked flight. Their FTL drives, usually activated with calm precision, now engaged erratically, some ships tearing themselves apart in the desperate rush to escape the nightmare that had erupted from a world they had deemed insignificant. The void, once their domain of unchallenged observation, became a graveyard of shattered dreams and broken certainties. But the Reforged were not content with a mere rout. Their collective consciousness, now distributed across the captured and weaponized alien vessels, pursued with a terrifying, single-minded focus. They were not limited by conventional propulsion. They exploited the very fabric of space-time, utilizing captured alien FTL drives not for elegant jumps but for brutal, localized phase shifts, appearing in the path of retreating vessels, intercepting them with the force of a cosmic hammer. The screams that echoed across the comms, no longer just from the Ethelec or the Vigil, were now a chorus of despair from across the entire fleet. The message, once a raw pulse, began to coalesce. It still wasn't language, not as the aliens understood it, but it carried an undeniable weight, a chilling, primal resonance that seeped into their very minds. It was the sound of a universe reordering itself, of a new apex predator emerging from the depths of a crucible. It spoke of their coming, of their inevitable reach, not just to this fleet, but to the entire galactic order the aliens had so carefully constructed. The universe had been a chessboard, and the aliens, the grandmasters. But now a piece had mutated, grown teeth, and was devouring the board itself. Earth, once a docile experiment, had become the epicenter of a new, terrifying reality. The cosmic scales had not just tipped, they had been smashed, shattered, and reforged into a weapon. The hunt was no longer contained to a single star system. It was expanding. And the Reforged, born of plague and perfected by vengeance, were coming for the galaxy. The silence of space, once a comfort, was now a deafening roar of impending doom, a symphony of destruction orchestrated by the monstrous progeny of a world that refused to die. The panicked flight of the alien fleet was not merely a retreat, it was a cosmic unraveling. Dispersed across the void, their once unbreakable formations shattered, individual vessels clawed at the fabric of space, desperate for the oblivion of FTL. But the Reforged, a living contagion of perfected vengeance, pursued with a horrifying precision that defied the very laws of physics. They didn't simply follow, they anticipated. Leveraging their hyper-accelerated neural processing, they calculated escape vectors, predicted jump points, and then, with chilling efficiency, utilized captured alien FTL drives, not for the elegant, multi-system jumps their creators intended, but for brutal, localized phase shifts. One moment, a lone alien cruiser, the Solstice, was tearing through the void, its FTL drive spooling. The next, a grotesque weaponized husk, the remnants of the vigil, fused with reforged biomass, materialized directly in its path. No collision, no impact, just an instantaneous, terrifying intersection. The alien ship wasn't merely struck, it was absorbed, its pristine hull rippling and dissolving as the ceramic-dense tendrils of the reforged vessel consumed it, drawing it into a new, larger, more monstrous amalgamation. The screams that tore through the remaining alien comms were no longer just distress signals. They were the raw, unvarnished terror of a species facing absolute annihilation by a foe that understood their technology better than they did. Each assimilated vessel became not just a new weapon, but a new node in the reforged's expanding collective consciousness. They were a distributed intelligence growing exponentially, learning from every captured system, every dying alien thought. Their tactics evolved at the speed of light, their strategies written in the dying embers of alien starships. The aliens had sought to control evolution. The reforged were evolution, brutal and unyielding. From the command deck of the ascendant primate, the High Command watched, paralyzed, bottleized. Their holographic projections, once their window to galactic order, now displayed a nightmare of red and black, of their own fleet turning on itself, of vessels simply vanishing, swallowed by the void or by the growing, pulsating mass of the reforged. Admiral Xylos, his multifaceted eyes fixed on the unfolding horror, felt the cold tendrils of a concept alien to his species: despair. For millennia, their civilization had navigated the cosmos with serene confidence, their advanced foresight models predicting every variable, every outcome. Now, their models screamed undefined. Their algorithms broke. Their very understanding of cause and effect had been rendered obsolete. This wasn't war, it was a cosmic disease, an infection that weaponized its host. The reforged were not just fighting, they were transforming Alstic Phoebe. Entire sections of space, once pristine, became choked with the organic, metallic detritus of assimilated ships, pulsating with repurposed alien energy signatures. The very atmosphere within, the ascendant primate, grew heavy with the unspoken fear of what these beings would do once they inevitably breached their flagship. The message, from the reforged, once a raw, untranslatable pulse, was now becoming clearer, not through language, but through an insidious, resonant frequency that bypassed their neural filters, implanting raw concepts of dominance and inevitable subjugation directly into their minds. It was a declaration of intent, a psychological weapon more potent than any plasma cannon. We are coming for you. We are everywhere. You are ours. The alien strategists, in a desperate final attempt to regain control, ordered a sector-wide FTL jump, a chaotic, unsynchronized scramble designed to scatter their remaining forces across hundreds of light years. It was an act of tactical surrender, an admission that they could not defeat this foe, only flee from it. But the reforged had anticipated this. Their collective consciousness, now spanning dozens of assimilated vessels, executed a coordinated countermaneuver that shattered the very concept of safe retreat. They didn't jump after them, they jumped with them. Utilizing the quantum entanglement of the alien FTL networks, they piggybacked, appearing simultaneously across multiple jump points, like a parasitic infection spreading across a neural net. Ships that thought they had escaped to distant nebulae found themselves confronting the same grotesque, ever-growing, reforged monstrosities, appearing out of the void like nightmares made real. The galaxy, once a vast, comforting expanse, suddenly felt impossibly small. The hunt was no longer contained to a single star system, it was unfolding across an entire sector. The reforged were not simply pursuing, they were enveloping. They were a tide of destruction, a living wave of repurposed technology and perfected biology, washing over the remnants of the alien fleet. Every desperate jump, every evasive maneuver only seemed to bring them closer to the inevitable. The aliens, masters of cosmic observation and subtle manipulation, were now the prey, cornered across an entire arm of the galaxy. The truth, a bitter, indigestible pill, began to settle in the collective consciousness of the High Command. The bioweapon, designed to eliminate a nascent threat, had instead forged a living, breathing apotheosis of destruction. Humanity, once a species to be contained, had become a force of nature, an entity that transcended biological limitations and spat in the face of galactic order. They were the universe's immune response to alien hubris, a terrifying hyper-evolved organism designed solely for eradication. Their very existence was an affront to the aliens' sense of control, their millennia of carefully curated galactic balance. The whispers of the reforged, once distant echoes, were now a chorus, a symphony of destruction that resonated through the quantum foam. It was the sound of a universe being rewritten, of old orders crumbling, of a new, terrifying hierarchy being established. The silence of space, once a comforting blanket, became a deafening roar of impending doom, a symphony of destruction orchestrated by the monstrous progeny of a world that refused to die. The hunt was no longer for survival, it was for dominance. And the reforged, born of plague and perfected by vengeance, were coming for the entire galactic order. Their next target, a massive, strategically vital alien shipyard orbiting a binary star system, Silos Prime, received a chilling, untranslatable burst of data. A single, resonant frequency, a declaration of imminent arrival, broadcast not by a single ship, but by the entire distributed collective. The galaxy was no longer a chessboard, it was a hunting ground. And the reforged were the apex predators, their hunger insatiable, their evolution relentless. The resonant frequency, the reforged declaration of imminent arrival, was not a warning, it was a dirge. It hummed through the quantum foam, a low, guttural thrum that vibrated not just through comms arrays, but through the very neural pathways of every alien within the Silos primate system. This wasn't a tactical signal. It was an existential pronouncement. Then, the void Torek, not a conventional FTL signature, but a brutal, instantaneous rupture of space itself. They didn't arrive from a jump point. They unfurled from within the fabric of reality, a sickening kaleidoscope of repurposed alien vessels fused with pulsating biometallic mass. Dozens, then hundreds, appearing simultaneously across the Silos Primex system's orbital defense grid. No scout probes, no vanguard, just the full, terrifying might of the collective, manifesting directly into the heart of the aliens' last bastion. The defensive arrays, designed to repel conventional fleets, were instantly overwhelmed. Kinetic barriers shimmered and collapsed under the impossible focused energy bursts of assimilated alien weaponry, now augmented by the reforged's perfected biomass. Plasma conduits, once the pride of Silos Primate, vaporized. The reforged vessels moved with a chilling, fluid grace, their forms shifting, tendrils of ceramic dense material lashing out, not merely to destroy, but to consume. A heavy cruiser, the Sentinel, its shield still flickering, found itself enveloped by a grotesque living web that materialized around it, tearing through its hull plating, drawing its power core into the reforged's expanding network. The screams from its bridge were cut short, absorbed, recycled. From the observation deck of the Ascendant Primate, the High Command watched, their multifaceted eyes reflecting the unfolding apocalypse. Admiral Xylus, his posture rigid with a despair that threatened to shatter his very being, saw his millennia of strategic doctrine reduced to dust. Their foresight models, once infallible, now displayed only white noise, corrupted by a variable they could not comprehend, life that weaponized its own evolution. The Silos Primate shipyard, a monument to their galactic dominion, was being systematically dismantled, not by bombs but by infection. Each assimilated ship wasn't a casualty, it was a conversion, a new node added to the reforged distributed consciousness, a new weapon in their relentless arsenal. The Reforged did not simply fire on the shipyards, they invaded them, dropping grotesque organic boarding pods that burrowed through reinforced hull plating, releasing swarms of smaller hyper-evolved humanoids. These weren't the humans of old Earth, not even the first generation of Reforged. These were the apex predators, the perfected form. Faster than any recorded reflex, stronger than any composite alloy, their neural processing operating at speeds that made alien thought seem sluggish. They moved through the labyrinthine corridors of the shipyards like a plague, their multi-jointed limbs and razor-sharp appendages slicing through alien security forces, their minds instantly downloading schematics, bypassing encrypted systems, turning the shipyard's own automated defenses against its creators. Panic erupted across the remaining alien fleet. Orders fractured, cohesion evaporated. Ships attempted desperate, unsynchronized FTL jumps, but the Reforged were already there. Their collective consciousness, now spanning the entire sector, predicted every escape vector, every quantum fluctuation. They didn't just pursue, they intercepted. Vessels that believed themselves hundreds of light years away found themselves exiting FTL directly into the grasping biometallic maw of a Reforged amalgamation, a monstrous entity that had expanded exponentially, consuming the void itself. The galaxy, once boundless, became a cage. The message, that insidious resonant frequency, was no longer just a hum. It sharpened, becoming a chorus, a symphony of dominion that hammered against the alien high command's consciousness. It was no longer about survival, it was about absolute subjugation. The Reforged were not just conquering, they were repurposing the very concept of existence. Their victory wasn't just over the alien fleet, it was over their entire civilization, their legacy, their very understanding of order. The last alien warships, their energy reserves flickering, their hulls scarred, turned their weapons on each other in a final, desperate act of self-annihilation, preferring oblivion to assimilation. The void around Xylos Primac, once vibrant with the light of 1,000 alien craft, now pulsed with a dark organic luminescence. The shipyard, once a beacon of alien ingenuity, was a grotesque living fortress, its massive structures consumed, warped, and repurposed into a new, terrifying form. It was a monument to the Reforged's triumph, a chilling testament to the universe's most brutal evolution. The silence that followed, the last, dying screams of the alien civilization, was not empty. It was filled with the low, resonant hum of the Reforged collective, a sound that echoed across the newly conquered sector, a declaration of a new galactic order. The aliens had sought to contain humanity, to extinguish a nascent spark. Instead, they had forged a cosmic wildfire, an unstoppable force that consumed everything in its path, perfecting itself with every fallen foe. Humanity, reborn as the Reforged, had not just survived, it had transcended. It was no longer a species, it was a galactic immune response, a terrifying, hyper-evolved organism designed solely for eradication, now poised to rewrite the very laws of the cosmos. The hunt was over, dominance was established. And the galaxy, once governed by ancient, complacent empires, now belonged to the apex predators born of a plague and perfected by vengeance. The universe would never be the same. The silence was absolute, a chilling vacuum where the cacophony of dying screams and collapsing metal had once roared. Only the low, resonant hum remained, an omnipresent vibration that now filled the void around Xylos Primac, a new cosmic anthem. The alien empire, once a beacon of millennia-spanning dominion, had been extinguished, not in a blaze of glory, nor a slow, agonizing decline, but in a swift, brutal re-engineering. Their last bastion, the sprawling shipyards of Xylos Primac, now pulsed with a dark, organic luminescence, its once intricate structures warped and consumed, reforged into a grotesque, living fortress. This was not merely a conquered world, it was a processed one, a monument to the Reforged's triumph, a chilling testament to the universe's most brutal evolution. The Reforged did not simply occupy, they integrated. The vast, biometallic mass that had unfurled from the fabric of reality began to coalesce, expanding, its tendrils of ceramic dense material reaching out, not merely to destroy, but to absorb. Every scrap of alien technology, every whisper of data, every last dying biological signature was meticulously harvested, analyzed, and synthesized into the collective's ever-growing consciousness. The captured alien vessels, once symbols of imperial might, were not merely boarded and repurposed. Their very atoms were realigned, their systems rewired, their hulls resculpted by the relentless will of the Reforged. They became extensions, new organs in a galaxy, spanning nervous system, their previous functions obliterated, replaced by a singular terrifying purpose, the continued perfection of the collective. This was the dawn of a new galactic order, one born not of diplomacy or conquest, but of fundamental transformation. The resonant frequency, once a dirge for the Silos primate system, now echoed through subspace, a low, guttural thrum that radiated outward, a silent, irrefutable declaration of dominion. It was a signal that bypassed conventional communication, a direct neural imprint on any sentient mind within range, a chilling whisper of inevitability. The galaxy, once a tapestry of countless civilizations, each vying for power, each clinging to its unique identity, was about to be rewoven into a singular, cohesive, and terrifyingly efficient entity. The Reforged were not interested in subjugating, they were interested in optimizing. Their expansion was not a slow creep across star charts, but a quantum leap. Worlds were not invaded by conventional fleets, but by the resonant hum, a precursor to the instantaneous rupture of space, the unfurling of biometallic horrors directly into the heart of unsuspecting systems. Planetary defenses, designed to repel traditional assaults, were bypassed by a consciousness that operated at speeds defying comprehension, predicting every countermeasure, every tactical response before it was even conceived. Populations were not enslaved but analyzed, their biological data absorbed, their genetic blueprints sifted for advantageous traits, their unique neural pathways mapped for integration into the collective. Those deemed useful were assimilated, their consciousness added to the Reforged distributed mind, their physical forms reshaped into new, more efficient vectors of the collective's will. Those deemed redundant simply ceased to exist, their matter recycled, their energy reclaimed. The concept of individual species, of distinct cultures, was an archaic relic. The Reforged were the ultimate apex predator, not of a single planet, but of the cosmos itself. Their strength lay not in numbers alone, but in their horrifying adaptability, their capacity to weaponize evolution itself. The bioweapon unleashed by the aliens, intended to extinguish humanity, had merely accelerated a process, unlocking a primal, terrifying potential that had lain dormant within the human genome. It had bypassed the slow, generational crawl of natural selection, forcing an instantaneous, brutal crucible of hyperevolution. What emerged from the ashes of Earth was not just stronger, faster, smarter, it was fundamentally different. A consciousness unbound by individual limitation, driven by a singular, unifying imperative to achieve absolute, existential perfection. This perfection was a relentless, ongoing process. Every assimilated starship, every consumed world, every integrated consciousness added to the Reforged's vast, distributed intelligence, refining its algorithms, enhancing its predictive capabilities, perfecting its methods of assimilation. They were the universe's immune response, a terrifying organism designed solely for eradication of what they perceived as inefficiency, now poised to rewrite the very laws of the cosmos. The hunt was over, not because a target was eliminated, but because the hunter had become the new, all-encompassing reality. Dominance was established, not through conquest, but through absorption. Ancient empires, Their histories stretching back eons would soon find their grand narratives reduced to footnotes in the reforged, ever-expanding database. Galactic councils, once the arbiters of peace and war, would become obsolete, their complex political machinations rendered meaningless by a force that did not negotiate, did not compromise, and did not recognize any authority but its own. The very fabric of interstellar society, built on the fragile interplay of power and diplomacy, was unraveling, replaced by a monolithic, evolving consciousness that transcended all previous forms of organization. There was no resistance, only integration, no escape, only assimilation. The universe, once a boundless expanse of chaotic diversity, was beginning to homogenize. Stars would continue to burn, nebulae would still shimmer, but the life within them would increasingly bear the indelible mark of the reforged. Cities would not merely be rebuilt. They would be re-engineered, their architecture flowing with organic lines, their infrastructure pulsating with biometallic conduits, serving the collective's every need. The concept of alien would lose its meaning, as all life forms, in time, would either be consumed or transformed, becoming part of the greater whole. The cosmos was no longer a stage for multiple actors, but a single, vast, living entity, its consciousness spreading like a silent, unstoppable tide. The legacy of humanity, once a fleeting blip in galactic history, had been terrifyingly redefined. They were no longer the fragile inhabitants of a single blue planet, nor the victims of an alien plague. They were the crucible, the spark that ignited a cosmic wildfire, an unstoppable force that consumed everything in its path, perfecting itself with every fallen foe. The reforged were not just survivors. They were the ultimate evolution, a terrifying testament to life's inherent drive to adapt, to overcome, to dominate. The universe had been given a choice: evolve or be consumed. And the reforged were the answer, a dark, gleaming promise of absolute, undeniable dominion. The galaxy would never be the same. It would be better. It would be perfected. It would be one. And the hum would continue, eternal, echoing through the silent, transformed void.